Hello and welcome to Tree Talk. This week we're going to talk about ticks, and I've got two special guests on, so we'll be right back. Hello, this is Dave Apsley with Tree Talk. I've got two special guests with me today. I've got Marcus McCartney here as an A&R educator from Washington County, and Tim McDermott from Franklin County, or an A&R educator, and he's a doctor of veterinary medicine also. So today we're going to talk about ticks, and I brought Marcus in to kind of share his experience with ticks and his family and how he's dealt with some of the diseases they carry. So Marcus, can you just give us a little summary of what's happened with your family and ticks?
Absolutely, Dave. Well, last winter, myself and my wife, we both dealt with Lyme disease, which is a tick disease. And the hard thing about this Lyme disease was getting it diagnosed and getting it treated properly. Last fall, my wife and I were doing a program together in Washington County, and all of a sudden, she started developing Bell palsy. We didn't know what was going on at first. We thought maybe she was having a stroke, so we took her to the emergency room where she got diagnosed with Bell palsy. And at the time, they said, well, we don't really know what causes the Bell palsy. It could be stress. It could be, she was sick the weekend before, so they kind of washed her. She went on her way. This was in September, about mid-September, and then probably about a few weeks later, she started getting really bad neck pain. She started feeling lightheaded, and so we took her back to the emergency room, and they kind of gave her some pain medicine for a headache. And about a week later, it never cleared up. So we went back to the emergency room, and they ran some tests. Everything was coming back negative. Well, then a few days later, she couldn't get up out of bed. She couldn't hardly go to the bathroom, raise her head up. So we immediately took her out of the area to another hospital. She works for WVU Extension. So we went up to Morgantown, West Virginia, where they immediately did a spinal tap on her, where they found out that she had meningitis. And they didn't know what was causing meningitis. They said, well, it's probably viral. We'll find out here in a few days. Well, 6 days went by, and they found out it was Lyme meningitis, and she had Lyme disease. And the thing was, her blood test, we went to the emergency room that second time, they did a blood test for Lyme disease, and it actually came back negative. So she was in pretty rough shape with that Lyme disease, and probably about the end of October on Halloween, she finally started recovering. As soon as she got better, I started going down with the same symptoms. Although I did not get the meningitis, I never developed Bell palsy, I started getting the same lightheadedness. My blood pressure in September, I had an annual checkup. It went from, it was great, about 127 over 78. Well, in November, it shot up to about 170. I started, I say lightheadedness, sometimes I call it cloudiness or disconnected. And then I just extreme fatigue. It's hard for me to even get up out of bed. After a couple hours, I just needed to lay down. Going down the stairs, I felt like I was going to fall down. I couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate. It was hard to even just read an article. So I went and got a blood test, and it came back negative. And so, but the doctor said, well, maybe you got a sinus infection. So my sinuses were inflamed. So after about 50 days of antibiotics treating for a sinus infection, no results, didn't get any better. And the funny thing was, before my wife got her diagnosis, they were treating her for an ear infection. It wasn't until actually after I had 28 days of doxycycline that I finally started to recover. And so we just assumed that's what I had as well, was Lyme disease, and the blood test did come back negative. And the funny thing was, in our area, we found from WVU Extension, or the hospital, that it's an outbreak in the Mid-Ohio Valley. Lyme disease, it is an outbreak. I had a master gardener who had the same symptoms as my wife, the meningitis, the Bell palsy. This past winter, during a lot of our agriculture programming, I presented on ticks just to create the awareness, like, hey, Lyme disease is here, protect yourself, especially when you're out in the fields or the woods, because Lyme disease is prevalent. And I had a farm, so I was kind of describing my symptoms and how I felt like, and I had a big commercial vegetable producer come up and approach me after the training and said, man, everything you're feeling, I'm feeling the same thing. I can't hardly get out in the field to get my crops ready. I'm thinking about just giving it all in. What should I do? And I said, well, you gotta get a blood test. And he called me back 6 days later, and his blood test did come back positive for Lyme disease. So that's kind of some of the symptoms that we had. So if you think you have it, if you think you have like lightheadedness, maybe elevated blood pressure, extreme fatigue, trouble focusing, going down the stairs, feel like you're going to fall down, weak knees. That's all the symptoms that I had. And my wife, she also had the Bell palsy, which is a symptom of Lyme disease as well. The bacteria did migrate back to her meninges and cause meningitis, and that's why she was in such rough shape for a while. But luckily, it was hard to get diagnosed in our area, and at the time, the doctors weren't really for sure what was happening in our area. It's kind of sad that the communication from the main land-grant university in West Virginia was not communicating with the hospitals in our area, and that's an area that actually from this whole incident, I spoke with the CEO and the president of the local hospital, and that's something that's hopefully going to come out, is that increased communication with the land-grant university, with these local hospitals when something like an outbreak is happening, so doctors can look for it and be aware, because Lyme disease, it is tough to test, to find a positive result.
Well, Marcus, I really appreciate you sharing that story. I know it's personal with you. My wife actually had a bout with what we think was Lyme disease. We never got it confirmed, but she was getting, I think, a lot earlier stages, but she was having some rheumatoid arthritis type conditions, went through a bunch of tests and never was positive for Lyme disease. But again, I kind of insisted on the treatments, and it went away. So we're pretty convinced that was part of it. So really appreciate you sharing that story. And now we've got Tim here to talk about some of the related things, the ticks that carry those diseases, and then some of the things we'll get to as how to prevent it and what to do if you think you've had a tick disease. One more question for you, though. Do you remember being bit by a tick?
Oh, great question. So neither my wife or I found a tick on us, remember having a tick, and we never had the symptom of Lyme disease, which is the bullseye.
The bullseye. So,
according to our doctor, he said, well, maybe that only shows up maybe about a third of the patients who have Lyme disease. Maybe Tim can verify that, but we never remember even having it. Our dog, we think our dog could have been the vector. That could have been how we got, because our dog sleeps at the foot of our bed, and so during the summertime or fall, her feet are sticking out of the blankets. That's where our dog lays. So we don't know if a tick that came off. We don't know how we got, but none of us, we both don't even recall having a tick on us, which is a scary thing.
So, Tim, can you tell us a bit about the ticks and the diseases they carry?
Sure. What we're noticing here in Ohio, and they're noticing it regionally as well, is that a lot of the preconceived notions that we have about ticks and the diseases they vector is based on what we used to know about ticks, where we would encounter them and they would be gross, you'd pull them off, and you wouldn't really think too much about them anymore. But in the last, say, 10 years in Ohio, we are seeing ticks being increasingly more important as vectors of bacterial diseases to humans and companion animals and livestock, viral diseases, and even some allergic symptoms as well. But we haven't really raised that public health awareness to where it needs to be in terms of how do you protect yourself and your family, what do you do if you're bit by a tick, what do you do if you have questions or you want to find out if you have these diseases? So when we talk about ticks in Ohio, we have 3 major species of biting ticks. These are all ones that are commonly going to be transmitting diseases both to humans, companion animals, and to livestock. The original one that's been around for many, many years is the American dog tick. This is a tick that prefers more of an open habitat. This would be in pastures or in meadows. Very commonly, though, encountered in cities on lawns or in public parks. One of the other things that when we talk about ticks that we really need to get through to the public is they're not just a disease you find when you're out in the woods. The last 2 ticks that were on me, one at a graduation party sitting in a chair on a driveway, and 2 in a public park sitting watching my youngest swim in a swim meet. So the next tick that we're going to show up on the screen right now is the Lone Star tick. And the Lone Star tick has been around in Ohio for between 5 and 10 years. It has slowly moved from the southern part of the state up through the northern part of the state. Like all of the other ticks, it will vector a number of bacterial and viral diseases to humans, companion animals, and livestock. But where this one really has people worried is there is an allergic syndrome that if you are bitten by a Lone Star tick and some of the carbohydrates from the tick saliva get into you and you get get a negative allergic reaction to that saliva, there's some chemical similarities in that saliva to mammalian muscle. And folks that develop that allergy called the alpha-gal or mammalian muscle allergy can actually become allergic to eating mammalian muscle, which is beef, pork, or venison for any of the hunters. The tick that is causing the most grief right now in terms of diseases that it is transmitting to humans is the black-legged tick or the deer tick. And that tick is one that, like the Lone Star tick, prefers more of a wooded habitat. Both of them are aggressive feeders. They will feed on humans, they will feed on livestock or companion animals. The black-legged tick or the deer tick is the primary vector for Lyme disease to all of these various species. And when we track the statistics for Lyme disease prevalence in Ohio, we're seeing just this tremendous, it's not even a linear, it's an exponential increase up now. The most recent statistics that I saw showed a 30,000 case load of positive diagnoses of Lyme disease in Ohio, but it's widely thought that it's underreported, and so we probably have way more cases than that.
Wow, that's scary. I'm a forester by training, and I've spent a lot of time in the woods, and I've got a lot of friends and colleagues that are in that same profession, so it's something that, you know, our folks are acutely aware because they're in the field daily, a lot of these folks, and they get exposed to a lot of ticks. So I've noticed that they've changed the way they do business in the last 10 years, especially those working here in southern Ohio. So what do you think about, or what are your recommendations on protecting yourself from ticks and to prevent getting them on you to begin with?
What I recommend is every person develop a personal protective strategy that they can use not only for themselves but for their families, and that includes protection for your companion animals to make sure that they're not a vector coming into your house. Awareness is critical. We have to get away from this thought that ticks are only in the woods and only in the summer, and because what we're finding is ticks have life cycles that will be anywhere from 1 year for, say, an American dog tick to a 2-year life cycle, which is what the black-legged tick has when it goes through its maturation process, which means that even if you're out in the woods in January and it's cold, you still have the potential to be exposed to ticks. You need to learn the proper removal procedures in case there is a tick embedded on you. You need to make sure that you develop a constant habit of going over and doing a tick check thoroughly to make sure that if you're outside, whether it's in your backyard or in the woods, that you would get a tick off you as fast as you can. You want to make sure that you address protection for your companion animals in terms of any of the flea or tick products, and you can work with your veterinarian to figure out which one of those is best for you. And then you want to make sure that you do your best at using the different repellents and insecticide products that are available in order to develop that personal armor, and so that if a tick gets on you, you encourage it to rapidly get off you.
So I noticed you've got a few products on the table. What are your recommendations, or what are some of the options that we have to keep ticks off of our skin, or to reduce the occurrence of it? I don't think you can ever totally prevent it, but...
No, but if you really take it seriously and you develop that personal protective plan, you will dramatically decrease your chance of getting bit. So I brought some common products that you can find over the counter. The first two right here are repellents. These contain DEET, which is an insect repellent. These are topically applied, and one of the things to realize is DEET has a certain level of control that you need to get above in terms of percentages of product before it's even minimally effective, and that's about 25% or greater. So when we look at something like this product, which is Cutter Skin Sensations, or any of the products that are like that, they're gentle products. They would have some efficacy for mosquitoes or some other insects, but it's not a high enough level of DEET in order to make a difference when we talk about ticks. A lot of these other backwoods products, these are 25% topically applied as part of your protection. This is a good option. That is for your skin. Keep in mind, read the label carefully when you use any of these products. Some of them have some different times where they would wear off, or water solubility. The other thing that I do, and I highly recommend folks do, is make sure you wear clothing that is permethrin treated. Permethrin is a derivative of the pyrethrum organic pesticide. Permethrin is the synthetic analog of that. It is an insecticide. So when a tick gets on your clothing that has been treated, whether you treat it yourself using some over-the-counter products labeled for use on fabrics, or you purchase treated clothing, or you send your clothing in to be professionally treated, what this does is it either encourages the tick to get off right away, or if they're on there long enough as an insecticide, it can kill them.
So that's kind of the standard in the forestry industry that almost everybody I know, and the first time I was introduced to permethrin was several years ago. I worked at Fort Knox in Kentucky, and we were utilizing it back in the early 90s even. But in Ohio, this wasn't commonly used. But treating the clothes is something that a lot of foresters are doing, a lot of foresters in southern Ohio who are in the woods daily, and they're not seeing the ticks. They're not getting ticks attached. They're seeing them on their clothes, and so they're really happy with the permethrin treatment. So something we would highly recommend. A product like this, how long would it last if you treated your own clothing?
So the nice thing about permethrin treated clothing is, depending on what way you do it, whether it's yourself or whether you purchase treated clothing, is it is fairly resistant to washes. So there's a lot of different label recommendations that are out there in terms of how long it lasts if you do it yourself, but you can find clothing that has been permethrin treated from any of the major outfitters, and a lot of those are rated for 30 or 40 washes. I do my own treatments with a permethrin product that is labeled for use on fabric, but if that is not your thing, if you look at any one of the major outfitters, Columbia, REI, or even Walmart or Tractor Supply, you can buy permethrin treated clothes. I usually recommend folks, if you do it yourself, you want light clothing, you want long sleeves, you want long pants, and you want to get all the way down. What those do is assist in identification of a dark colored tick moving on light colored clothing.
The company I use, you can actually stuff a mailer full of all the clothing you can get in there, and they'll treat that clothing, and they advertise that you actually get 70 washings out of those treatments. And I've been wearing that. I've got about 3 pair of pants that I'll rotate through, and I've had really good luck with a company called Insect Shield, and they've got a big online presence as well. There's other companies that do the same. And I'm pretty certain that all of our military that train in areas, tick-infested areas, their clothing is treated, and so there's a few companies that do that, so something we highly recommend. So the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is if you're bitten, how do you remove the tick?
So that is a really, really important point, and for all of the viewers, we will provide links on how you can get your clothing treated, where you can find the various products that we talk about, great color pictures for your own identification, and everything that you will need to develop that personal protective armor for your family. So when you remove a tick, this is a very, very important thing, because there's a lot of old wives' tales out there in terms of things like using gasoline or putting a cigarette or a match out on the tick or anything like that that is generally going to do much more harm than good. When a tick bites its host, it does a number of different things. The first thing is to realize that its mouth part, which is called a hypostome, is a large serrated flat blade, like a harpoon, or think a serrated shovel. That gets injected into the host, and that allows them to hold on. They secrete a number of substances. They're going to secrete a bunch of a sticky glue around that mouth part embedded into their host, so that when they engorge with blood, and they can get just degrees larger when they grow, that they won't fall off the host until they're done feeding. They secrete an anticoagulant. They're going to be feeding on the host for anywhere from 7 to 10 days if left undetected. And then they secrete their saliva that goes in through their gut, which is where they transmit these bacterial and viral diseases. So if you find that you have a tick embedded on you, what you don't want to do is panic. Evaluate how long it's been on there. Don't grab it by its caboose and try to yank it off. What you'll end up doing is probably squeezing a bunch of the gut contents into you. You want to take some tweezers or any one of the number of various tick removal tools that are on the market, so that you can get your utensil around the tick, slowly kind of pushing down on the skin or on the fur if this is on your dog or your cat, so that you can get that mouth part whole, and then when you remove the tick, you will have it intact. And this is very important because now there are testing laboratories such as Tick Report, which is University of Massachusetts, where if you were to take the tick that was embedded in you or your companion animals, you can send that tick in and they can test it to find out if it carried any of the diseases that we worry about. That can be taken to your doctor so that you can work with your physician to make sure that you are tailoring any treatments that are needed to whatever disease it is, and you make sure that you are treating accurately for the correct length of time. As of right now, the most recent cost estimate I saw for Tick Report was $50, which is pretty close to how much it would be for a trip to the doctor ahead of time. And so that is my current recommendation, which is different than any flushing it down the toilet or squishing it or throwing it away.
So if you're bitten by a tick and you remove it, how would you collect it and preserve it to mail in and get treated?
You don't have to put it in any chemicals. In fact, if you would put it into bleach or some harsh chemicals, that actually might denature the tick and make testing difficult to do that. So they recommend that you simply put it in a plastic baggie.
Like a Ziploc bag.
And then wash your hands and then wash the area that you had that bite in as good as you can with soap and water. Some folks might choose to contact their doctor at that point, especially if they start to see any of the surface infections or some of the lesions that can start early on. I've found that Tick Report gets its test back pretty quickly within a week or two, and that is a critical thing to consider because all of the diseases that are vectored from ticks to livestock, companion animals, and humans are universally disastrous. They are ones that will cause multiple different organ dysfunctions. They can cause meningitis, they can cause cardiac disease. Very commonly, they will get into the joints and cause an arthritis. That damage will last for a long time, and even if you go on antibiotics, a lot of the damages that ticks can vector to their host, these damages, once they're permanent, even if you eliminate the tick's bacterial or viral vectored organism, you're not going to necessarily get better.
Yeah. So another question too is, how long does it take for a tick? I've heard different varying estimates, but if you're bitten by a tick and you catch it immediately, like you've been in the woods today, you found a tick, as soon as you got home, is there a length of time that tick needs to be on you before it can transmit the disease, or is that vary by disease and tick, or is there anything to those?
We have a lot more research that needs to be done on that. Most of the research that is out there was done by the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, on black-legged or deer ticks for Lyme disease. And what they found is that there is a linear correlation that however long the tick, if it is infectious, has been on the host, that increases the chances for transmission. In the veterinary world, we used to recommend get that tick off within 24 hours.
Right.
That is based on that CDC research. What we're finding now is there is variability between the tick, the life cycle of the tick, whether it is a larval form, a nymphal form, or an adult form, the disease that they're carrying. I've seen some research studies that have shown that Powassan virus can be vectored from a tick to a mouse host in the laboratory in as little as 15 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, Tim, I have a question for you. So, working in the extension office, we have lots of folks who bring in insects and ticks. I get them quite oftenly. Would you recommend if someone brought a tick in for me to ID, that I tell the client to send it to a lab to see if it has a disease, or should they just sit and wait for a few days to see if a symptom develops? What would you recommend? Personally,
I recommend to all of our clients that if you remove a tick that was embedded on you for any length of time, that you get that tick tested. And that's the same with a dog or a cat. If it has not been embedded, you just catch it walking down your clothes, or you remove it immediately from your body and it has never had a chance to inject the mouth parts and inject all of the various substances we worry about. As long as it hasn't been embedded, I have no concerns about disease transmission. But if it's been embedded for any length of time, if it's within the client's budget, I recommend they do that.
So where's the best place to go to get information? We've thrown a lot at folks today. I could post a lot of links on my site as well if that's easier, but do you have a site that you recommend that we send folks to?
So we got several sites that we want to share with you folks. OSU Extension and its various colleague partners in entomology and the College of Food Ag does maintain a site that is early in its infancy, that is u.osu.edu/tick. The other two sites that I use as my go-to sites, one would be Tick Report, and Tick Report is where you send your ticks when you have them and you want to make sure if they have or do not have disease. That is from the University of Massachusetts. And then my go-to site for pretty much all of the other detail is called tickencounter.org.
Okay.
That is a University of Rhode Island site, and that has just awesome color pictures, what the tick activity is doing in your part of the country right now, a little bit about how you can protect yourself with the various repellents and insecticides that are out there, and it's just an excellent resource.
Great. So what we'll do is post on u.osu.edu/Southeast Ohio all these links too, so that you can find them. I guess it's about time to wrap up. So any kind of closing comments or thoughts that either one of you have as far as the ticks? I mean, personally, in the last 5 years, I've taken a lot more seriously after my wife started having those symptoms, and then I've got so many friends that have had issues with Lyme disease or alpha-gall. I know a good friend from Hocking College that's had that. So any other words of wisdom on ticks before we wrap it up?
Just from our experience, if you think you do have Lyme disease or a disease, be persistent. You know, the hospital, I didn't mention the first, but they, first time we went to the hospital, second time we went to the hospital for neck pain, you know, they grouped us in a group. They put us in a group of people there for neck pain or for just get pain pills. And they kind of dismissed us. And the third time, the same thing. They just kind of dismissed us. We tried to get my wife admitted. They wouldn't even do that. It wasn't until we had to leave the region to get her admitted, and when we did leave the region, they immediately saw her condition, and they did admit her. So I said be persistent, and demand a Lyme disease test if you think
when in
you
doubt.
have it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a negative doesn't necessarily mean you don't have it either.
That's right.
Not as consistent.
Yep.
Anything else, Tim?
My recommendation for all the viewers is work on developing your personal protective protocol for you, your family, your companion animals, and your livestock. There are lots of great different things that we talked about today that you can do for yourself and your family. Make sure you work with your veterinarian to develop a companion animal protocol. For any producers that are dealing with livestock, it can be a challenge. We do not have outstanding products right now for tick control in livestock, but recognize that livestock are a preferred host for a lot of these ticks, and they can transmit some pretty deadly diseases to your animals as well. And if you encounter a tick, you have questions, contact your physician. Go through the links that we have right now if you want to develop your protocol, and just spread the word that ticks are a concern and they can cause a problem for you and your family.
Yeah, great. We don't want to scare anybody from spending time in the outdoors, because it's great to be outdoors, and there's as farmers, there's things that you have to do outdoors, and we all love being there. But there's just being aware and taking precautions. Use the protection. Do the tick checks when you get back in. Do a tick check. Check your body out. Look in the mirror. Get your spouse or someone else in the family to help check the places you can't see, and you can't be too cautious when it comes to ticks. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Dave.